Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Dear reverend brothers and sisters, today I am live to talk about the prominent modern writers of the Edwardian period. Before going to discuss the prominent writers of this period, I would like to talk about the modern period briefly. We know very well that the span from the death of Queen Victoria to the beginning of the Second World War is called the modern period. That means the period between 1901 and 1939 is generally accepted as the modern age of English literature. The death of Queen Victoria in 1901 marks the beginning of this new literary era, and the beginning of the Second World War in 1939 indicates its ending. The modern period comprises two shorter ages. The first one is the Edwardian period from 1901 to 1910, and the second one is the Georgian period from 1911 to 1936. So I am going to discuss the prominent modern writers of the Edwardian period. The first decade of the 20th century is called the Edwardian period, Edwardian age, due to the fact that King Edward VII reigned over England during this decade. Some historians think that the literary trends of this age continued until the outbreak of the First World War in 1914. There are some others who think that those trends continued until the end of the First World War in 1918. So opinions about the ending of this age vary, but because the literary features and characteristics of this period didn't have sharp closing point in time. Now let's discuss the prominent modern writers of the Edwardian period. First of all, Henry James. Henry James was one of the greatest British novelists in English language. He is considered a key transitional figure between literary realism and literary modernism. He was impressionist. He was impressionist. He was impressionist, but did not concentrate on plot construction. He is famous for a number of novels dealing with the social and marital interplay between immigrants Americans. For example, The Portrait of a Lady, Ambassadors, The Wings of the Dove, The Golden Bowl, and so on. Then George Bernard Shaw. George Bernard Shaw was an Irish dramatist. He started writing in the previous age, and he is a modern dramatist, and he became the leading dramatist of his generation, and he was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1925, and he is the greatest modern English dramatist, and he is also called the father of modern English literature, and he is mainly famous for his drama of ideas. He wrote more than 60 plays, including major works such as Man and Superman, Caesar and Cleopatra, The Joan of Arc, Candida, Devil's Disciple, and so on. Next, Joseph Conrad. Joseph Conrad was a Polish British writer, and he is considered one of the greatest novelists to write in English language, and he is also considered an early modernist. He wrote stories and novels, and his novels reflect the aspects of the European dominated world, including imperialism and colonialism, and deeply explored the human psyche. His realities are covered with romantic charm and adventurous exaltation. He is mainly famous for his three novels: The Secret Agent, The Nigger of the Narcissus, Heart of Darkness, and so on. After that, Joseph Rudyard Kipling. He was an English journalist, short story writer, poet, and novelist. He is regarded as one of the most important modern poets in English literature. Besides, he is seen as an innovator in the art of the short story, and his children's books are classic. In 1907, he was also awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature as the first English language writer to receive the prize. And truly speaking, he was also sounded for the British Poet Laureateship and several times for a knighthood, but he declined both. The Jungle Book and Kim, both are his fictional works, and he also wrote many short stories. The Man Who Would Be King is one of them. He also composed many poems, including Mandele, Gongadin, The Gods of the Copybook Headings, The White Man's Burden, and If, and so on. Then John Millington Synge. Edmund John Millington Synge was an Irish dramatist, poet, prose writer, travel writer, and collector of folklore. And he was also a key figure in the Irish literary revival. And he was also one of the co-founders of the Abbey Theatre. He is mainly famous for his only play, The Playboy of the Western World, which caused riots in Dublin during its opening run at the Abbey Theatre. His other remarkable works are In the Shadow of the Glen, The Riders to the Sea, The Whale of the Sands, Poems and Translation, and so on. The most important one is the Oscar Wilde. The Oscar Wilde is one of the prominent writers of the modern period, that means the Edwardian period, and he was an Irish poet, novelist, and dramatist. His plays are considered comedy of entertainment, and he is mainly famous for his farcical play. Farcical play. His remarkable plays are The Lady Wilder Marspan, A Woman of No Importance, An Ideal Husband, The Importance of Being Earnest, and so on. George Robert Gissing. George Robert Gissing was a very important modern writer of the Edwardian period, and he was an English novelist, and he published as many as 23 novels between 1880 and 1903. He also worked as a theatre throughout his life, and his first novel is Workers in the Dawn. Besides, his other remarkable novels are The Netherworld, New Grub Street, The Old Women, etc. Then the most important modern writers of the Edwardian period is William Butler Yeats, W.B. Yeats. William Butler Yeats was an Irish poet, dramatist, and critic. He is mainly famous for his use of symbolism and mysticism. He was also one of the leading figures of the 20th century literature, and he was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1923. His narrative and dramatic poems are The Wanderings of the Oisin and The Two Kings, The Gift of Harun al-Rashid, and his lyrical poems Crosswise, The Rose Tree in the Seven Woods, The Wild Swans at Cooley, The Tower, The Second Coming, Sailing to Byzantium, A Prayer for My Daughter, The Lake Isle of Innisfree, and so on. And The Resurrection is one of his plays. Sigmund Freud is one of the most important prominent modern writers of the Edwardian period, and he was an Australian neurologist and the founder of psychoanalysis. He was a psychologist known for his theory of psychoanalysis. His remarkable works are Interpretation of Dreams and Psychopathology of Everyday Life. Then Barton Russell. Barton Russell was a British philosopher, logician, mathematician, historian, social critic, political activist, and Nobel laureate, and he was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1950. And we know very well that William Sidney Porter, O. Henry, is a famous American short story writer. And his stories are known or famous for their surprise endings. His remarkable short stories are The Gift of the Magi, The Ransom of Red Chief, The Retrieved Reformation, Duplicity of Her Graves, and so on. So these are the prominent modern writers of the Edwardian period, but I would like to mention some slant features. Some slant major literary features of the Edwardian period I would like to mention. Most important one is the advance of psychoanalysis has a deep impact on the creative works of this period. The poor finds a stronger voice in literature. Then women issues come to light in literary works. The Victorian style still continues. The greater awareness of human rights also influences writings. The mass reading public emerges as a consequence of the Education Act in 1870 for compulsory primary education. Consequently, popular fiction was in great demand. Many authors turn away from the Victorians' optimism and the self-imposed duty of civilizing the world. The white man's burden. These authors satirizes Victorian values. And finally, the progress in comparative mythology has introduced the intelligentsia to the study of different belief systems. It has affected the writer's faith in Christianity as the only correct faith. So that's all for today. Thank you very much for your cooperation and coordination.